How is it going, everyone? It's K-Limited here, and today we are going to be talking about a video game on the PS2. We are going to be talking about Crash Bandicoot Twinsanity. This is a game that I have a little bit of history with and some nostalgia for, because back in the day when renting video games was still a thing, I did rent this game on a Wednesday night. I remember picking this up and playing just a little bit of it. I didn't get very far back then because I don't know why, but sometimes we would rent games on things like church nights, and it made no sense to do that because we didn't have time to play them anyway, so I don't know why we did that, but I played this game back in the day, and I remember having some fun with it, and I had a nostalgic spot for this game for that reason, and picking up again, that nostalgic spot definitely was there. That nostalgia was definitely there when I started playing this game, and I really enjoyed it for the first bit of it. And then it started going a little bit downhill, and we're going to get into the entire thing. But first, let me explain what Crash Twinsanity is. Crash Twinsanity is a video game on the PS2, obviously part of the Crash Bandicoot series. But this time you get to play as more than one character. You actually get a few different playable characters in this one. The main focus is Crash Bandicoot and Neo Cortex. You actually get to play as both of those characters. Sometimes you get to play as them at the same time, and they give you a bunch of different puzzles that you can use, that you can play to, and you have to use both characters to be able to figure out the puzzles and stuff like that. There's a lot of just unique stuff that they did with this idea, and I actually like a lot of the team-ups that they had for this game, and I think that a lot of it works pretty well for the most part. There's also later missions where you can play as Nina Cortex. Nina Cortex is the niece of Dr. Cortex, so it's kind of cool that you get to play as Nina Cortex as well. And the other character you get to play as is basically it's just Crash in a mech suit. I don't really think they should count that as another character, but on the box it says 4 characters, so I think that's what they're talking about. I think they're literally just talking about Crash in the mech suit, but the mech suit is kind of cool, I will say that. And the main storyline of this game is Crash Bandicoot and Neo Cortex have to team up because Dr. Neo Cortex's parrots that he used to experiment on have now come back for vengeance, and they are wanting to destroy the island that Crash and Neo Cortex live on. So the entire game is all about Crash and Neo Cortex teaming up to defeat these 2 evil twin parrots, and it's an okay story. I'm not a huge fan of the parrots, if I'm being honest. They're not the best villains of the Crash Bandicoot series. They're okay. I would have preferred pretty much anything else, but it is what it is. You know, they're not great villains, but they're there. I feel like they're pretty much one-off. I don't think they're in any other games. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it kind of seemed like the end of the game was pretty final for them, if I'm being honest. So I'm not a huge fan of them, though. Not great villains, but at least you have some great playable characters, right? You know, and each character has their own different abilities whenever you are forced to play as just one of them. You know, obviously Crash Bandicoot, you get the regular stuff you're used to, jumping up, doing your double jumps, doing your spin attacks and things like that. When you play as Dr. Neo Cortex, you have your laser. You have a little laser gun that you can run around and you can shoot blocks with, and you don't have much of a jump. Dr. Neo Cortex actually has pretty much no jumps. He just gets a little hop, and it's not even big enough to hop over boxes, so you kind of have to watch out for obstacles more as him. And then you have Nina Cortex, and Nina has her like bionic arms, and she can use them as basically grapple hooks and grab onto ledges that are pretty far away. And each one definitely feels unique to play as, and I like playing as each character, even though Neo Cortex is definitely the weakest out of all of them. I still enjoyed playing as him. Now, the actual gameplay and the actual like level design and everything, all that stuff starts off really fun, and I really enjoyed it at first. I enjoyed playing as Crash Bandicoot and taking Neo Cortex and launching him. You can pick him up and throw him across levels to go and like unlock levers for you. Sometimes Neo Cortex will get stuck on a pipe, and you'll have to put him in like a drain and wash him down this drain, and he'll end up in a different part of the course. There's some parts where he's getting chased by things, and you have to basically get obstacles out of his way as he's being chased. And I like those moments. I thought those were really fun. And I like pretty much all the team-up moments. I think they did a good job with the level design with keeping the team-up with Neo Cortex in mind. There's some parts where Crash uses Neo Cortex as basically a snowboard and goes downhill, riding on top of Neo Cortex. Those are always really fun. And I also like the ones where you are basically... you and Neo Cortex, Crash Bandicoot and Neo Cortex, are in a big brawl, and it's like one of those cartoon brawls where there's like smoke around them and stuff, and they're like punching each other and everything, and your characters are just in a ball, and you're rolling the ball of those two just fighting down a hill, and you're just trying to control the ball and control where it goes. I always thought that was fun as well. And you can also use Neocortex's head as a hammer, which I thought was kind of fun too. So there is some charm here. The level design is definitely made for this kind of like, this dual gameplay of using two characters at the same time. And whenever you are playing as a solo character, it's actually pretty well designed for that as well. I think the first levels are very well designed, and then towards the center of this game, it kind of slips up a little bit by having levels that just last a little bit too long. When you get to the level where you finally get Neocortex, the level just feels like it drags on and on and on, and it's one of the bleakest levels in the game. I always hate it when the bleakest levels in the game are always the longest, and there's a lot of video games that they make that mistake, and this one definitely did that in the halfway point. It was just like, okay, this level is really just the same thing over and over again. I'd really like to get out of this level and just proceed on with the story, but you are stuck at this university that Neocortex is at for a long time. It took a while to get out of there, and when I finally did, I was pretty happy about it, but that was a miserable level. Another thing that wasn't great was the Engine is another character, his boat. There's one level where you are on his boat, and it would have been fine, but the loading mechanism for this game isn't great. So I saved before the boss fight thinking, oh, well, if I run low on lives, I can just reload, and I'll be right before the boss fight. Nope, it put me all the way at the beginning of the level, right before I got on the boat, and it takes a bit to get to that boss fight, so I was not very happy with that either. So the loading in this game and the saving, all that's not great. It doesn't give you good positions. Where you save is not actually where you're going to spawn when you hop up back on the game, and that's not a good thing. That's definitely a negative. Instead, you have to look for crates that have this little like ball on it. If you find the crates with the ball on it, that's going to be where you actually reload at. The actual checkpoints are basically only for when you die and you respawn. If you use a continue, there are continues and there's lives in this game. If you use a continue, you will not spawn back at the checkpoint, you will spawn at the save point. So keep that in mind, because you will have to restart large chunks of levels if you hop off the game early before getting to another save point, or if you have to use a continue. Wasn't a big fan of that one. That felt a little bit clunky, but it is what it is. It's kind of just what you're given here. So I wanted to throw that out there as well. And that definitely hurt the experience when I had already done all of the boat. And I'm just like, I'll just reload, have my lives back. And then it was just like, nope, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to repeat the entire level now. So that was not fun. But once I got past those two specific levels and I got back onto the island where I was helping Cortex basically escape evil Crash Bandicoot, that it started to pick back up again, and I started enjoying the game again. So it really just has kind of like a midway slump, and starts picking up again after that midway slump, and it starts getting good again. I started enjoying it again around then as well. And then, of course, the final level is right after the evil Crash Bandicoot level, and it's when you actually are taking on the twins' evil lair, basically. And it's actually a really fun level, too. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And all the different traps and puzzles in the lair were actually pretty fun to play through, and it was really fun to navigate this layer and try to get through it. The only other thing I would say in terms of an actual negative for this game would be the camera angle isn't always fantastic. In the big open areas, it's fine. I have no issue with the big open camera. But whenever you get into the closed areas, the camera doesn't have, obviously, as much area to move. So it can mess with you a little bit. It's hard to control sometimes, and it's hard to get the camera to go exactly where you want, especially like if you are in like a hallway situation or something like that, and there's like, things that areas you could just fall off cliffs and stuff. The camera really doesn't work well in those areas, I will say. So that would be the only other negative of this game, I think. For the most part, I enjoy every other part of this game. The boss fights are actually pretty fun. I enjoyed pretty much all of the boss fights. There were some that were kind of difficult, like I think Dingo Dial was a pretty difficult boss fight, but a lot of the boss fights did feel pretty fair, and some of them did feel a little bit easy, I will say, but I enjoyed them. They were fun, they were unique, and they all had their own gimmick for defeating the boss, and a lot of them played with that whole idea of controlling Crash and Neocortex at the same time, and I like that they did that. I like that they incorporated that even into the boss fights. And then the final boss fight requires all three characters. It requires Nina, it requires Crash, it requires Dr. Neocortex. I guess if you want to consider him the mecha Bandicoot character, it requires the Mecha Bandicoot as well. So it requires all that stuff to defeat the final boss, and it just makes for a really cool final boss fight and a really fun level overall. I really like Crash Twinsanity. It's I don't know if I'd say it's as good as I remember, because I frankly didn't play that much as a kid. I just have fond memories of it because of that little bit of it I played. But I do think that if you are a fan of Crash Bandicoot, it's probably something that you should try at some point. It is a fun Crash Bandicoot game. I think it's easier than the original Crash Bandicoot games, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the original Crash Bandicoot games actually had a little bit of a difficulty problem, but this one doesn't have that problem. It's overall still a fun game. It just has kind of a slow midway point that on a few levels that may make you wish that the levels would just kind of like be shorter, you know? Some of these levels just seem like they drag on a little too long, but it's not a huge deal, honestly. Overall, in the grand scheme of things, the game is still pretty fun. And I will say, the game actually does look pretty good as well. Graphically, it's a nice looking game. The cutscenes look pretty good, and the colors of the game, for the most part, in like the nice tropical areas and the snow areas, they're nice and bright and colorful. Even, you know, the last couple worlds are nice, bright and colorful. It's just really the only areas that aren't nice and colorful are just Engine's Boat and the university. Everything else, though, looks great, and I love the way it looks. I will say, I'm not a big fan of this Crash Bandicoot sneaking areas. Having to sneak around in Crash Bandicoot and have these stealth sections, that felt weird. I was not a big fan of that, but that's probably, I think, the last complaint I can think of. But overall, it still works. Even in the stealth sections, even though I'm not a huge fan of those sections, they still work fine. It's odd to do that in a Crash Bandicoot game. But I still like this game a lot. I think it's fun, and I definitely think that's something that you should pick up if you are a Crash Bandicoot fan. And I will say, and I will leave you with this, the humor in this game is still really good. There's a lot of good, funny moments in this game, and I think that the humor is actually one of the best parts of this game. And with that, I will leave you with this short clip. You have a great one.
Coming through! Ow! Ladies?
No!
Excuse me, madam. Are those real?
What is it?
Mother?